Imagine the pain of being left out, of feeling that, for some reason, you don't belong in the most important moment of someone's life who should be by your side. This was the reality I lived, an experience that shaped me and, in a way, taught me about the value of truth, justice, and the power to choose one's own story. I always had 4 older brothers, all married, but to my surprise I was not invited to any of their weddings. Each one chose to have a ceremony without children, and in my childish mind I thought, I am their sister, I will certainly be the exception. But the truth was harsh, and at the age of 10 my older brother Leonardo was the first to get married. And, of course, without children. My heart broke because he was marrying a woman I really liked, but I was not there to witness this special moment. The cycle repeated itself. When my brother Fernando got married, I was only 12 years old and I was once again left out. It wasn't easy, but I tried to understand. I was just a child, and life seemed to teach me to accept other people's choices, even if my own wishes were ignored. At 15, when my sister Beatriz walked down the aisle, she even considered inviting me, but the pressure from her family got the better of her. The wedding would have to be childless. I fought, but the answer was clear: it wouldn't be fair to the others. It was at that moment that anger built up inside me. I screamed, cried, and was punished by my parents for months. My heart felt heavy and frustration took over me. They didn't see me, they didn't give me the chance to be part of their lives. I turned 17 and my younger brother, Gustavo, got married. I didn't care anymore. The pattern was clear. I wouldn't be invited, I knew that. And as expected, my cousin, who had just turned 18, received the invitation, but I didn't. This time the pain didn't come in tears but in silence. I sent a short message to congratulate him and moved on without expecting anything more. When it was my turn, I decided to do something different. I was engaged, about to get married, and I finally had the power to make my own choice. My wedding would be unique. My moment was mine, and I didn't invite any of my siblings. Life taught me not to expect anything more from those who left me out. When they realized they weren't on my list, they started to question me. Beatriz asked if the invitation email had gone wrong. Fernando, straight up, asked why he hadn't received his. I read the messages one by one and decided to ignore them. I didn't want any more quick answers. I didn't want to be part of this cycle of frustration anymore. The next day my mother called. As soon as I answered, she started talking. But at that moment I already knew what she wanted to say. The pain of being ignored, left out, made me make a difficult but empowering decision. They never saw me, so I stopped waiting. I didn't invite them because the most important thing at that moment was to honor my own choice, my own journey. What did this story teach me? Sometimes, we need to make difficult choices to free ourselves from a past that hurts us. We need to understand that, in order to be happy, we shouldn't wait for others to validate our story. The power is in our hands. What about you? Have you ever been through something like this? Have you ever made the decision to move forward, even when it seemed like the world around you didn't see you? I invite you to reflect on your own journey, to share your story, and who knows, inspire someone to take control of their life. If you've ever felt excluded or undervalued, remember, the choice to move forward and empower yourself is in your hands. And here on our channel you will always find support for your journey. Share this video, leave your comment, and stay with us. Together, let's transform our pain into strength and our story into inspiration. That familiar feeling came back, as if all the pain that had accumulated over the years had become a storm ready to erupt. My mother began to question me, her voice thick with anger, as if I had committed a crime. "Why didn't you invite your brothers to your wedding?" she asked, her voice tense. I took a deep breath, tried to find the strength within myself not to let myself be shaken, and calmly replied, "They didn't invite me to theirs, so I thought it would be fair to return the favor." There was a deep silence on the other end of the line. I knew she was trying to process what she had just heard, but soon she couldn't take it anymore. "This is your fiancé's doing, isn't it?" she snapped. "You were always so sweet and now you're so weird." I almost laughed nervously. As always, she was looking for someone to blame, someone to take her out of the reality of what was happening. But I wasn't there to give her easy answers. I took another breath and firmly said, "It's not about him, Mom. This is my decision. They've never made me feel important enough to be in my most special moments. So I don't see why I should include someone who's never included me." It was as if the words came out of me with a force I didn't know I had. She was silent for a moment, probably trying to understand what I'd said. And then, without warning, she hung up the phone. As always, she reacted like this. Instead of trying to understand, she'd rather cut it off altogether. But the messages kept coming. My brother Leonardo, the first to get married and the first to make it clear that I wasn't part of his life, sent me a dramatic message. "Mariana, I know you were hurt that you weren't invited to my wedding, but you were just a kid. It wasn't personal, Al. I thought you'd gotten over it by now." How could he say that? How could someone ignore another person during the most important moments of their lives and still expect the pain to go away? It wasn't about getting over it, it was about justice. I replied, "It's not about getting over it, Leonardo. If I wasn't important enough to be at your wedding, why should I invite you to mine?" His response was quick and, honestly, even more ridiculous. He called me a spoiled brat and said that family should always come before resentment. Oh, now they wanted to be a united family, but where were they when I was just a little girl begging to be a part of the most special moments of their lives? They excluded me, and now they wanted to pretend that everything was okay? Things only got worse when my parents decided to intervene. They showed up at my house unannounced, thinking they could change my mind. As always, they were more concerned with their external image than with me. My mother, with the same voice full of indignation, said, "What will people think of us, Mariana? What kind of person doesn't invite their own siblings to their wedding?" She spoke as if I had committed a crime, as if I were the villain of the story. I tried to explain once more, "This isn't about a marriage. This is about all the years I was ignored, when I wasn't important enough to be there for you when it mattered most." But my father interrupted me, calling me childish and selfish. All I had done was seek respect, dignity, and above all, to be seen. Their anger wasn't at what I had done, but at what they were seeing. A person who had grown tired of being treated as invisible. Sometimes we have to make hard choices. Sometimes we have to learn to say no to those who don't respect us. It's not about revenge or spite, but about knowing that we deserve to be treated with the same dignity we offer. What the story teaches us is that our peace begins when we stop seeking approval where we have never been recognized. And if you've ever been left out, ignored, or treated like your emotions didn't matter, know this: there's nothing wrong with putting yourself first. Your story is yours, and there's nothing more powerful than taking control of your own life. Share this story, leave a comment, and most importantly, let go of other people's expectations. Your journey is unique, and it's time to start living for yourself. I was exhausted, and I finally lost my patience. That pain, that feeling of being ignored for years, had reached its limit. I looked at my mother and said, with a calmness that surprised me, but with a firmness that made me feel stronger than ever, "Childish and selfish? I was a child when I begged to go to your weddings. Everyone said I was dramatic. Now, as an adult, you want to pretend it never happened. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to change my mind. They're not going to my wedding, and if you keep treating me like this, you won't either." The room fell silent, and it was in that silence that I felt the weight of my decision. My mother looked like she was going to faint, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. My father, on the other hand, turned red as a tomato, completely speechless. There was nothing more to say. They stood up without a word and slammed the door with a force that made my heart sink. And in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. In the weeks that followed, the attacks began. They called me spiteful, ungrateful, and my brothers tried to make me feel guilty, as if I were destroying our family. Beatrice even tried to appeal emotionally, saying that her nephews were excited for the wedding and that it would be cruel to leave them out. But I was tired of being manipulated, and I ignored every word. The truth was inside me, and I knew what was fair. On my wedding day, an immense relief washed over me. The ceremony was everything I had ever dreamed of. Light, full of love, and surrounded by people who truly cared about me. As I danced with my husband, I couldn't help but think that for the first time, I was in control of my own life. Nothing could take away my peace at that moment. Nothing. Later, I learned that my mother had organized a separate dinner for my siblings that same day as a kind of silent protest. I thought it was pathetic. They could console each other, but that wouldn't change the fact that for the first time I stood up for myself. I said no. And that was liberating. But as always happens, the peace didn't last. A few days later, the comments began, the veiled attacks, as if everything I had done had been a mistake. In the family group, Beatrice was the first to attack. "We saw some pictures of your wedding. Why did those flowers look so basic?" I tried to ignore it, but the irritation began to grow inside me. Then Fernando chimed in. "And the place? I don't know, it looked more like an impromptu party than a wedding. You could have asked us for help. How are they seeing the photos?" I knew I had blocked everyone from my social media. How dare they talk like that, as if they had the right to criticize everything, even though they hadn't been a part of it. That's when I realized. They hadn't changed and they probably never would. But I had. I was at peace with myself. And, most importantly, for the first time in my life, I was living according to my own choices without worrying about anyone's approval. Not anymore. That's my message to you. When life seems to be pushing you down, when the people around you try to dictate your path, remember, your life is yours. Don't let anyone take away your freedom to make your own choices. Sometimes we need to say no, we need to set boundaries, and we need to learn that true peace begins within ourselves. If you've been through something similar, or if you feel like it's time to take control of your own story, please share your experience. Here we respect the choices you make for yourself. Your journey is unique and it deserves to be celebrated. If this video touched your heart, be sure to leave a comment and share it. Together we can create a space where our stories of courage and liberation are heard and respected. They had somehow gotten the photos through mutual friends. And to my surprise, not only had they invaded a moment that I had deliberately chosen to be private, they were also criticizing something they had not even experienced. That bothered me deeply. How dare they, after everything that had happened, intrude, judge, and still not have the right to their opinion? I took a deep breath, trying to keep control, forcing myself not to respond right away, but frustration was building up inside me. The final straw, however, came when my mother called. She didn't waste time beating around the bush. As soon as I answered, she began her criticism without even giving me a moment to breathe. "Mariana, what was that wedding like? I saw the photos and honestly I expected more from you. It all looked so simple, nothing like your brother's weddings. You deserved something more glamorous. Why didn't you do it in a church? Your sister had something much more beautiful. That didn't seem worthy of our family." I was shocked. Not because I agreed, but because the coldness of those words left me speechless for a moment. How could someone be so rude and still think they had the right to intrude like that? I tried to remain calm, but anger began to bubble up. When I finally spoke, my voice was as cold as ice. "Mom, the only thing that wasn't worthy here was you. You weren't even invited, yet you feel entitled to criticize. You saw pictures of something you shouldn't have seen. If you didn't like it, that's okay. I didn't plan anything to please you." She became furious but didn't back down. Her response was even more filled with indignation. "You're being so selfish, Mariana. Do you really think you can just cut us out of your life? This isn't normal. You've always been resentful and now you're taking it out on us. What did we do to deserve this?" It was at that moment that my patience completely ran out. I couldn't stay calm any longer. I couldn't hold back everything I was feeling. "What did you do, Mom? Let's refresh our memories. You ignored me during the most important moments of my life. I was never important enough to be at your weddings or those of my own siblings. You excluded me and now you want to judge me? No, Mom. That won't happen anymore. I'm no longer the invisible girl you tried to erase." The truth was there, raw and direct, like an arrow that finally hit its target. I was no longer the child who kept quiet in the face of injustice. I had the right to live my life, to make my choices, to seek the respect I deserved. It wasn't selfishness, it was survival. And more than that, it was an act of self-love. Because life, my friends, is not about pleasing others. It's not about living for others. It's about honoring yourself, recognizing yourself, giving yourself the value that no one can take away from you. When you finally realize that you deserve to be happy in your own way, that you shouldn't submit to anyone who never valued you, you feel a unique freedom. And that's what matters. If you have ever found yourself in this situation where you had to fight for your dignity and peace, I want to know. Comment here, share your story. Together we can continue our journey of self-discovery and liberation. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are. I stood there, my mouth dry, my heart pounding. How could she, after everything that had happened, expect me to include her in my wedding as if nothing had happened? The irony of that situation was suffocating. Now you expect me to include you in mine as if nothing had happened? That's hypocritical. The only thing that could have ruined my wedding was inviting you, I said, and the truth seemed heavy in the air. The silence on the phone was profound, but I knew deep down that she wouldn't understand. I waited, took a deep breath, but it wasn't what I imagined. "You're ungrateful, we did everything for you and this is how you repay us? You're abandoning your family for a man who barely entered your life. You'll regret this," she said, with such contempt that I could almost taste the venom in her words. Before she could continue, I hung up. I was tired of arguing with someone who would never have the courage to admit his mistakes. The weight of what had happened was weighing on me, and I didn't want to carry that burden any longer. But as expected, the drama didn't end there. My brothers, clearly encouraged by my mother, began bombarding me with non-stop messages in the family group. Beatrice was the first. "You destroyed your family, Mariana. Congratulations on walking away from everyone who ever loved you." Fernando, ever the showman, was no slouch. "I hope the husband you chose is worth it because you lost everything for him." I read it all in silence with a heavy heart, while my husband stood beside me, seeing the pain it caused me but not knowing what to say. After a few minutes, without thinking twice, I left the group. It wasn't worth it. Deep down, I knew that nothing they said would change my truth. In the following days, more messages, more calls. My mother, in a desperate effort, showed up at my door unannounced. But I was different. I already knew what I needed to do. When I opened the door, she started yelling, "Family is forever, Mariana. You can't just eliminate us because you're hurt." I took a deep breath, and with a calmness that surprised me, I replied, "Family should mean support, respect, and love, not manipulation and constant criticism. If that's all you have to offer, then yes, I can eliminate you from my life. And that's exactly what I'm going to do." I slammed the door shut and she continued yelling outside. But I didn't care. I had already made my choice. Since then, I've cut off all contact with them. The few times they tried to get in touch, it was with more accusations and criticism. But I didn't have the patience for that anymore. My life was now focused on me, my husband, and the people who truly care about me. The rest, well, the rest was left behind. And that's what I want you to take away from this story. Sometimes cutting ties is not an easy decision, but it is necessary. Sometimes, in order to move forward and live in peace, we need to distance ourselves from those who don't respect us, who hurt us with their words and actions. The most important thing is that when you choose to protect yourself, you choose to respect yourself. And when you decide to leave behind what hurts you, you make room for a lighter, fuller life, where true love, the love you deserve, can flourish. If you've ever been through something like this, if you've ever had to make the difficult decision to walk away from those who should support you, I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments if you feel comfortable. And if you know that this message can help someone, don't hesitate to share it. We're all on this journey together, and no one needs to go through it alone. I looked back, and with a light heart, I knew that the decision to leave was the best I ever made. I was finally free from what was holding me back, from the pain I had been carrying for years. I don't miss anything. I don't feel guilty. I feel a peace I never imagined possible. My life is now peaceful and happy, much more than I ever dreamed. Since I cut ties with my family, I feel like I can finally breathe deeply. My husband and I are building our life based on something I always wanted but never had: love and respect. And I can't describe how wonderful it feels to be surrounded by this positive energy, knowing that we are creating something solid, something that is true and genuine. Recently, incredible news came to our family. I am pregnant. When I saw the positive result, I was completely overcome with emotion. Tears fell and my husband hugged me tightly, saying, "We will raise this baby with so much love, with so much affection, that he will never need anything else." And at that moment, we knew that from then on, our son would only be surrounded by people who truly cared. This meant that my family, with all their drama and toxicity, would have no place in our baby's life. I don't know how, but soon the news reached them. Maybe it was a distant relative, maybe a mutual acquaintance. And as always, they started bombarding me with messages. The first was from my mother. "Mariana, I heard you're pregnant. I want you to know that, despite everything, we are your family, and it's important for the baby to have his grandparents around." I read the message but didn't respond. I had already decided with my husband that, out of respect for our son, they would have no contact with him. It wasn't a decision of revenge, but a need to protect him from everything I had been through. I couldn't, under any circumstances, risk exposing my son to the same toxic behavior I had always experienced. After my mother, my brothers started sending me messages. Beatrice was the first. "Congratulations on your pregnancy, Mariana. Despite all the fighting, we are siblings and I know you will need support. We are here for you and the baby." Fernando, always with his direct way, said, "Hold your grudge if you want, but at least let us meet our nephew. He deserves to know he has a big family." I read all those messages in silence, while my husband looked at me with a soft smile. He took my hand and, with a calm that only he has, said, You don't have to respond. You don't owe them anything. This is our moment, and what matters now are the people who really care about us." And he was right. We don't owe anyone anything. The only thing we owe above all else is our peace, our happiness, and the protection of our child. And as we continue on this journey with a light heart and focused on what's best for our family, we know that we made the right decision. And most of all, that we are now surrounded by true love, the kind that finally gives us the freedom to be who we truly are. If you've ever had to make a difficult decision like this, if you've ever had to cut ties to protect your well-being, I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments, and if this touched you in any way, share it with someone who needs to hear it. We're all on this journey together, and the most important thing is that you never have to feel alone. It was hard, much harder than I imagined, but at the same time, I felt immense relief in making the decision I knew was right. When my mother showed up at our house that week with that look of regret, my heart sank for a moment. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't let that emotion get to me. I couldn't give in again, not this time. When she started talking, trying to justify her actions and arguing about the baby, I was blunt. "Mom, don't insist. You're not part of my life, and you won't be part of my son's life either." The words came out firmly, without hesitation. I knew I needed to protect my son, and that meant keeping away anything toxic, even if it was my own family. She tried to argue, but I didn't want to hear it. It wasn't about revenge or resentment, it was about protecting the life I was bringing into the world. I didn't want my son to be exposed to emotional manipulation, constant criticism, and destructive behavior. And that, unfortunately, was something my family had always offered, and there was never any room for change. Her attempt to cry didn't affect me, because I knew her tears weren't genuine regret. They were more an attempt to make me feel guilty to get what she wanted. I didn't let that get to me. I closed the door, firm in my decision. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Since then, the attempts to contact me have not stopped. The messages, the calls, the accusations. But I don't care anymore. Now my priority is my pregnancy, my husband, and the baby. We are planning everything with so much love and care. I can't wait to start this new chapter with the safe and loving home that I am creating. Some may even call me selfish for wanting to keep my family away from my son, but for me, that is not selfishness. It is protection. It is ensuring that my son grows up in a healthy and safe environment, away from toxic influences. And for the first time, I feel at peace with this decision. My son deserves to grow up surrounded by true love, and that is what I am going to provide for him. My family may continue to blame me, but I don't care anymore. I am in control of my life now, and I finally have the freedom to live the way I have always dreamed. That is true power. The power to make the right choices for myself and for my son. And honestly, that is liberating.